we were discussing the value chain analysis. Okay. Now we also discussed the primary activities, inbound logistics, operations, outbound logistics, marketing and sales, and the service part. Coming ahead to the support activities, the other part. Where the first one is the firm infrastructure. Now here, when the company thinks of having the primary activities like inbound logistics, operations, outbound logistics, marketing and sales, service part, it also should have the other supportive activities in place to achieve the basic core competencies of the organization. Now, all the activities that an organization uses for analyzing external opportunities and threats, identifying the internal core strengths of the organization, as well as understanding the weaknesses. And to achieve the objectives, the firm should have the proper infrastructure. Like one can think of having the accountability, the finance part. Now, here, when the firm includes the IT part, or one can say the technological integration with reference to different functional aspects, it becomes much more easier to communicate, and there is a centralized pool of data resources managed. Now here, accounting, finance, planning, or the functions regarding general management, the legal support, and managing government relations. All of these are the different departments which support the basic or core departments. So here, managing the government relations, if there is a separate department which will take care of managing the government relations, then it is the headache of single department, and this responsibility does not lie on the core departments. So here, better the organization is managed by allocating the responsibilities to different departments. Similarly, for HRM, the HRM department should take care of recruitment, selection, training and development, appraising the employees. So here, with reference to all the human resource management activities and responsibilities should be taken care by this single department. Here, it should not happen that the core departments also are overloaded with these extra additional responsibilities. When individual departments are given a specific responsibility, the managers can concentrate on only those responsibilities and perform well. If the core managers are also loaded with these support activities, then it becomes difficult for them to manage at all the ends, and the focus is lost. Now, in technological development, all the activities that organization uses for creating, developing, and improving products and services are included. Like one can have activities like research and development department, product department, process design department, equipment designing, and service procedures. So here, if these support activities, now here it depends upon the organization. It may be a corporate umbrella, it may be a strategic business unit, it may be a small scale industry. The type of industry can be of any type, but here, when there are people to manage the things, then it improves the efficiency of operations and the firm is well managed. Procurement relates to all those activities that an organization uses for procuring the materials which are needed to produce the products or the services. Now here activities like fixed assets, like taking care of the machinery, the equipment, procuring of the raw material, the required supplies, whether they are in place. So all this is taken care by the procurement department. Though it seems to be much simple, but here in actuality, procurement of raw material, it again depends upon the demand for the product, and demand for the product ultimately when the company takes the competitive environment into analysis, nobody can predict what would be the demand. So here sales forecasting is one of the important criteria or aspect upon which the procurement of raw material depends. So in totality, when we take the Porter's generic value chain, okay, so here when we take the Porter's value chain analysis, so first and foremost thing are the inbound logistics, operations, outbound logistics, marketing and sales and service at a foundation level or the basic level. And to support this, we have firm infrastructure, human resource management, technological development, and procurement. All these activities are supportive to this core departments or core foundations. That's why here Porter's value chain focuses on collection, or one can say integration of chain of activities, right from procurement of raw material up till the goods, finished goods reach the customers. So here in the Porter's value chain, each and every activity is connected, and so we say it's a value chain analysis. Now it's a challenge for the companies to add a value at any stage, maybe in the production, maybe in quality emphasis, maybe reaching to the customers through innovative distribution channel. Now the basic objective of any organization is to earn profits. Every organization strives to gain more revenues, generate more profits. So how well the company or the organization manages this value chain, that much more would be the revenues collected or profits derived. The customer adds value to the offering or the service, but what would be this value? It is just judgmental from the marketer's perspective. It is the ultimate customer who will define value from their perspective. Now here there are certain requirements as far as this value chain analysis is taken into account. Recognizing the activities that make up organization's value chain. So what are the activities which should be actually considered into this value chain, and then bifurcating them into the primary and the support activities. That is one task which is required by the organizations to be done properly. That is allocation of these tasks into primary and the support activities. And then identifying the things done in those activities that contribute value for the customers. So how value can be included in this chain of analysis, that is other thing. The next thing is how value can be improved or increased so that at the less cost, more value can be provided to the customers. Now, here, if you take an example of the speedy delivery of the goods, it is with reference to distribution channel or time management. So here, when the customer receives the offerings or the services before time or on time, the customer is delighted and happy and satisfied. So here the value is attached to this time management factor of supply chain. Here organizations take a lot of efforts to innovate or combine the activities to improve the value analysis. Now, not only the distribution channel, but even the product management team also strives. They emphasize on quality building of the offering. So when the companies think of combining the values all together, then it improves the efficiency of this value chain analysis. The value chain analysis helps the managers to improve or increase the value part of the offering to the end customers. So here, through value analysis, the managers are able to understand organizational appraisals. Also, the clarity about particular area strengths and weaknesses can be jotted down. And that particular core or area can be improved upon. Though it has its own advantages, it has its limitations also. Like it is the concept wise, it is very simple. But when it comes to implementation, monitoring of different activities or aspects of this value chain is challenging. What constitutes value from the customer's point of view is very difficult to be traced out by the managers. Also, the value chain analysis requires the data from various sources. Now, in today's era, because of improvement of the data analytics, data management, and artificial intelligence, these things are becoming much more simpler. But still, since it is integration of the overall activities, it becomes complex many a times. It has to be simplified by the managers and is a challenging task. So this is about the value chain analysis, Porter's value chain analysis part. Any doubts as far as this point is considered? So we move ahead with the benchmarking part. Now benchmarking is with reference to the comparative analysis. So here, just note down the difference. The first one is value chain analysis, which is internal to the firm, where the organization internally analyzes their core strengths and weaknesses by critical analysis of value chain of activities, while benchmarking, it has a comparative approach where the company compares itself with its competitors. So we can say here the external factor is added as far as benchmarking is considered. This method of organizational appraisal is considered. Now here, the process of benchmarking, here the purpose is to find the good or the best practices within and outside the industry to which an organization belongs. Now here the company thinks of analyzing from the competitor's point of view. What is the benchmark as far as that particular field, that particular sector is considered? If there are 4 to 5 competitors, okay, and one company is a business leader, so what are the attributes which the company marks upon or banks upon? Not necessarily the company should always think of having the same practices imbibed into the organization, but at least it keeps a note to find what are the best practices. Here, the objective of this benchmarking is to understand the best performers in the particular zone or area which one can think of matching, not only matching but moving ahead of it. That is what is the objective here basically. So it includes 3 types. The first one is the performance benchmarking, second is the process benchmarking, and third is the strategic benchmarking. Now, when we consider the performance benchmarking, it means to compare one's own performance with that of some other organization, other company, for the purpose of determining how good one's own organization is. Now, here, when we take into consideration of market share, okay, the leader and the follower. If there are 2 companies, the first one enjoys the leadership position, dominating the industry, and there is a other company which is very near to it, which is also performing better, but it does not hold the leadership of the firm or of that sector. So this company always follows the leader. So here there is competition, and the company which is following wants to achieve that benchmark of the leader. So it strives hard through its maybe portfolio analysis, maybe customer satisfaction, through 360 degrees approach. The company, it evaluates a 360 degrees to reach to the end customers and try to gain the leadership position and increase the market share. The process benchmarking. Now, process benchmarking is to compare the methods and practices for performing processes. Now, when the company thinks of comparing with reference to the process, there is a certain company which has achieved a process benchmark. Many times you see that in service industry specifically, most of the processes are simplified. Even customer compares the 2 organizations. Now, simply if you take an example of the banking industries, okay, to get the loan facilities, the process should be easier, simpler. So when the customer compares the 2 banks, there are certain evaluative criteria in the mind of the customer that maybe this process is tedious, it will take a long time. The other bank, it's more reliable, it's very quick to get the loans, so the customer opts for the other option. Now here, when the customer is evaluating the banks, the customer is taking into account the process part, and here the companies have to think about this approach. Now, wherever there is the cutthroat competition among the organizations, the companies think of having different attributes to compare the benchmarks. Now, when it comes to strategic benchmarking, here it relates to comparison of the long-term significant decisions and actions taken by the organization to achieve their objectives. So here basically what all the competitor, what strategies the competitor adapts to achieve its objectives is thought of, is taken into account. When the firm thinks of comparing them with whom they should compare. Okay. Now here again there is a certain criteria for comparing the companies. Why a company should compare a particular competitor? So there are certain attributes stated. They can be classified as follows. Internal benchmarking. So internal benchmarking is the comparison between units or departments of the same organization. Now here when the company thinks of having the benchmarking system, it should also think of its own departments. It is confined to its own organization also here. Though each and every department has a different benchmark set, maybe finance department will have a different benchmark, marketing department will have a different benchmark, production department has its own benchmark, the IT department has its own benchmark, but in totality, everybody is moving ahead towards the vision statement of the organizations, towards the common objective. Hence, how these departments are contributing to move ahead towards the common objective. That is what is taken into account. Competitive benchmarking is direct comparison of own performance against the best competitors. So here, the firm takes into account the performance of the competitor who is performing excellent in that arena, in that field. And here the company tries to evaluate where they stand as compared to the competitors. That is, what are the strengths, what are their weaknesses. Now, this helps the companies to improve, to overcome the weaknesses and think of some innovative ideas to match the competencies with the competitor or other organization. The next is the functional benchmarking. Functional benchmarking is comparison of processes or functions against those of non-competitors or non-competitive organizations within the same sector or technological area. So here the company takes into account the non-competitive organizations, how they are working, what are the processes they are following, or their day-to-day functional operating procedures. So on this grounds, the company thinks of comparing. Next is the generic benchmarking. It's the comparison of own processes against the best practices anywhere in any type of organization. If you take into account the production department, there may be certain set protocols which are globally recognized or they are universal. So in such case, the company thinks of comparing their own processes with the such standard procedure by the organization. So this is what is generic benchmarking. Here the main purpose should be to find out the best practices so that one can think of achieving them by improving the internal processes or activities. Now here, before one thinks of going ahead with this benchmarking, it's enough to show where a firm excels and lags behind first of all. This assessment will help in analyzing the companies, what are their core strengths and weaknesses. So here, this will help the organizations to also develop the capabilities or core competencies. The capabilities will ultimately reflect the core competencies of the organization. Now, though we have the positive side of the benchmarking appraisal, still it has certain limitations, like it's very time consuming. When you start comparing yourself with the competitor and analyze the variables, then it is very expensive and time consuming. It requires high level of commitment from the company. And it's not that it's a one-time process. Each and every time competitors come up with the new strategy, new processes. So here one cannot say that it is a one-time task. It is on a continuous basis. It has to be done continuously so as to achieve the better results. Now, financial statements of the publicly held companies, they are easily available, and therefore organizations may be tempted to do much of the benchmarking on the basis of this. These statements also provide lagging indicators and may not be really useful as the basis for benchmarking. So here it may be difficult to find benchmarking companies in all types of areas also and activities. So now it depends upon the organizations to take into account which type of competitor has to be mapped or benchmarked. Now here, suppose there is a huge gap between the leader with all the core competencies, and here at the other side, maybe suppose your firm does not have that much pool of resources, maybe financial resources, technology resources, then there is no point in comparing. So this is the limitation of the benchmarking system here. So any doubts as far as this system is considered? Hello. Hello.
No, ma'am.
So we move ahead with one of the important concept, that is the business portfolio analysis. Now here, if you take examples of the companies like Reliance, Reliance is operating into which areas, into which sectors? Many sectors, no? If you take Godrej, if you take Tata, okay, all of them are into different fields. If you take an example of the Tata company, it is in the IT sector, Tata Consultancy Services, we know. It is in the furnitures, it is in the insurance business, it is into FMCG category, it is into automobile industry, and so on. Or even the gold jewelry business. the brand Tanishq. So here the companies are into the they are diversified into many businesses. Each business is an individual strategic business unit. So we say that if we consider the Reliance, like Reliance Petrochemicals is one of the strategic business unit. Reliance telecommunication services is the other aspect. Reliance into FM retail business is the other category. So like that, each of these businesses are categorized as an individual strategic business units. Now here, if we try to analyze the characteristics of these strategic business units, then it is a single business or a collection of related businesses that can be planned from the uh, completely or separate from the rest of the companies. Like I gave an example of Tata with insurance at one end and the gold jewelry at the other, and the FMCG is the next. So it has its own set of competitors. So when I say Tata Automobile, okay, they have their own set of other automobile industries. It has its own competitors. Similarly, if you take the gold jewelry, okay, they have their own competitors in that sector. So that is one of the characteristics. Next, it has a manager who is responsible for strategic planning and profit performance. So here there is an individual manager for this strategic business unit who takes care of the entire business, who is responsible for this business and also controls the factors which affect the profits with reference to that strategic business unit. Now, when the corporate decisions are made, okay, it has to take into account the diversified businesses also. So here, what is the meaning of portfolio analysis for businesses? Which company is performing, to evaluate just the performance of those sectors with reference to that company. That is what is business portfolio analysis. As compared to insurance business, what is the scenario of FMCG industry? What is the scenario of pharmaceutical industry? What is the scenario of automobile industry? So here, since the company has its own pool of investors, the company comes to know which sector, which company is performing better as compared to the other sector. Now here, each company has its own limitations. Okay, when we say that this is performing well and that is not performing well, it may have its own constraints. But when we take the whole um, picture into account, okay, the company understands where it has to pool the resources. Suppose if it is into educational sector and it requires funds there, then maybe it can divert the funds from the automobile sector or insurance sector, which are performing at peak, and divert these funds into the low performing organizations or the companies. So to manage the business, this portfolio analysis has to be done by the organizations. Now, whether you have understood the meaning of portfolio or business portfolio analysis. Hello? Hello? Whether you have understood?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes,
Okay.
ma'am.
Okay. So in the next session, maybe today I will discuss the theory part. In the next session, I will take the practical examples of one or two companies, the corporates here. But today at least we will discuss the outline of this concept. So there are two best known models to go for this portfolio analysis. One is the Boston Consulting Group model. The other is the General Electric model. Now, those who are the students, those who are specializing in marketing, okay, they will again study this concept in strategic marketing strategy is one of the subject in your specialization. There you will study this part with reference to marketing strategies. Okay, these are the overall strategies in this strategic management part. Now coming to the first model, which is Boston Consulting Group. Now here it is also known as BCG matrix model. It is popular by BCG, Boston Consultancy Group, BCG matrix. Now Boston Consultancy Group, which is a leading management consulting firm, it has developed and popularized this growth share matrix, which is the BCG matrix. Now here, if you see, there are four quadrants in this. At one end, there is relative market share of the company, and at the other end, there is the market growth rate of that company with reference to that particular businesses. So here, the market growth rate on the vertical axis, it takes into account the annual growth rate of the market in which the firms operate. Now, usually a market growth rate about 10% is considered high. And at the other end, there is the relative market share, which is measured on the horizontal axis, which refers to the strategic business unit's market share relative to that of its largest competitor in that segment. It serves or it depicts the measure of the company's strength in that particular market segment. Now, if we see here, there are four cells, four quadrants, each indicating different type of businesses. Now, there are question marks. If you see, there is a question mark. These question marks reflect the businesses which operate in a high growth markets but have less or low relative market share. Now, most of the companies, those who start or they are in the introduction phase, they come into this category of question marks, as the company tries to enter high growth market in which there is already a market leader. Now, this question marks, since it is in the introduction stage, any company which starts, okay, it requires lot of cash. We have seen that whenever the company is in the initial phase, it requires lot of investments to be done or lot of cash, maybe on the physical infrastructure or fixed assets, like it needs land, it needs machinery, equipments, people to keep pace up with the fast growing markets. Now, slowly and steadily, this firm starts picking up. Now here, why the term question mark is used here, basically in this quadrant? Because the company has to think hard about whether to keep pouring money in this business, whether the businesses are performing well or not. See, until certain limit, the company thinks of investing or pouring money in the business which are into this quadrant of question mark. Okay, now if suppose a company is diversified into 8 businesses, 8 different types of businesses, 3 businesses are set out of this. Out of 8 diversified sectors, if 3 of them they are established and 5 of them are into this question marks, imagine the resources of these 3 companies which are established would be pulled to question marks. The question marks will always need more of the investments or more of the cash flow, and the company thinks of allocating the cash flow from the other better 3 performing organizations. But again, there is a question whether these 5 companies can come out of this question mark towards stars or cash cows or not. So at a certain point, the company starts thinking if the businesses are maintained in the same portfolio of question marks, then the companies have to think hard upon the position of these businesses. The company might be better off investing more cash in 1 or 2 of the other businesses where they are getting the revenues instead of focusing on this 5 question marks. Now coming on to the next part is the stars. Stars, if these question marks, okay, initially when the businesses require a lot of cash, the company supports a lot of cash, but then the businesses should be able to manage and move ahead in the stars quadrant. They should not remain in question marks for a long time. That is what is expected. So when the question marks business become more successful, they become a star. Here, a star is a market leader in a high growth market. It also has a high market share, relative market share, as well as high market growth also. Now, a star not necessarily provides a positive cash flow for the company. The company must spend substantial funds to keep up with the high market growth, and here the company has to fight with the competitors. It has to be on toes to enjoy the leadership position. Here, the follower companies are always attacking the leaders, and hence the company has to be on toes and defend themselves in this star position. So when the companies are diversified operating, they should have stars also, those who are established markets. For any company, when it starts with the parent company, okay, they see to it that first and foremost thing, they get this first company into the stars category, and then they go for the other diversified allied sectors. Now, this is about the stars. The third is the cash cows. Now, when a market's annual growth rate falls to less than 10%, a star becomes a cash cow if it still has the largest relative market share. So here, market growth rate is less, but it has high market share. It enjoys the high market share. A cash cow produces lot of cash for the company. Now the company does not have to finance capacity expansion because the market's growth rate has slowed down. It enjoys the economies of the scale, and that's why it enjoys the higher profit margins also. Now, the company usually uses the cash cow business to support the question marks. Even if the company has more of the businesses in the cash cows, it enjoys the profits or the revenues, and very few companies in the question mark, one or two question marks, and the others are in the cash cows who are on a continuous basis deriving the profits. These profits will help to support the question marks and sustain the business. If this cash cow starts losing the relative market share, then the company will have to pump in a lot of money in this to retain its position. If the company is not able to maintain the market share, then ultimately they are directed towards the last quadrants, that is dogs. Now, what are the dogs here? Dogs are the businesses that have weak market shares in low growth markets. They generate low profits or they are into losses. Now, here the company should consider whether it is holding on to the businesses for good reasons, such as maybe an expected turnaround in the market growth rate or a new chance at a market leadership, or for any sentimental reasons. No, this graph or this analysis has to be done at the corporate level by the organization to understand which of the companies are in which of these quadrants. Now, when once the company analyzes about the different positions of the companies, it can, the next task is to determine the objectives and frame the strategies and budget to these different strategic business units. So here a company thinks of assigning resources, pooling the resources for those businesses which require funds. Now, wherever there are profits and the companies are doing well, okay, once the organization understands that the company is doing well, they are deriving the profits, they did not think about that part. But wherever the company feels the shortage of market share, the market share going down, definitely here the company thinks of implementing the strategies to uplift the performance of the organization, performance of the companies here. Now, any doubts as far as the basic framework is considered? Students, this is very important concept. Have you understood this mold or the four quadrants? Hello.
Yes, ma'am.
Now, based upon this, the strategies are formulated. The company takes into account the strategies. Here there are four strategies: the build strategy, the harvest, the hold strategy, the harvest strategy, and the divest strategy. So four of the strategies are taken into consideration by the organization or by the companies. Now, when we take the build into account, here the objective is to increase market share. Now, to increase the market share, companies can think of all the possible efforts. Building is more appropriate for question marks, whose market shares must grow if they are to become stars. Now, here, if you see, the question marks are in the zone of relatively low market share. Hence, the company builds or takes efforts to convert these question marks who enjoy low market share to the stars, towards the stars who will gain more market share. That is building. Now here the companies can think of the strategies to penetrate the market. Maybe they can go for aggressive advertising. The companies can think of introducing the small packets, small size, to penetrate into the market if the product is costly, or maybe just to make the customers aware that the offering is available in the market. Here, the company tries to convert the non-users to the users category so that the market share increases or the market share improves. But here again, it requires cash flow, and the cash derived from this profit generation cash flows, the cash is diverted to this question marks. Whenever the company takes aggressive marketing, it needs money. When it goes for shift of big packaging to a very small packaging, it increases the per unit cost. Okay, so here it compromises on the economies of the scale also, and that's why the price increases. Similarly, when the company thinks of pushing the product through the aggressive promotion of distribution channels, maybe by increasing the margin of the dealers or the distributors, here also the company needs a lot of cash. And that's why when the company goes for the strategy of build of converting these question marks into stars, it requires more cash flow. Now today we will stop here. We will discuss the rest of 3 strategies in the next session. Today we will stop here. Okay. Thank you, students.
Thank you, ma'am.